we go.
Yep, there we go.
Good afternoon to those who are in the process of joining our webinar. We will get started in about 3 minutes, so make yourself comfortable. All right, welcome everybody. My name is Julie Boggess, and we are so glad to have you here today to join us with this webinar that's going to address a very important topic that is occurring right now under our COVID quarantine. And I am the grants manager and a certified master trainer with the AGE-u-cate Training Institute. And I'm joined today with my co-presenter, and I will let her introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Drew Lazara. I am a licensed clinical social worker and am the geriatric clinical navigator with AMITA Behavioral Medicine. So it's so nice to be here with you all.
Thanks, Drew. We welcome all of you, and I know that there are still some participants that are joining us, and they can just come in and pick up where we are starting with our webinar. So we welcome and look forward to discussing the impact that social distancing is having on our family caregivers, particularly those caregivers who are taking care of loved ones who are living with dementia, and those loved ones who are residing in a nursing facility, assisted living community, or some type of a memory support program. We hope that this webinar will be a helpful resource for not only our family members who are on the call today, but also for our skilled nursing and assisted living providers. We are going to make this webinar available to you so that you in turn can share it with your family members who are really struggling to cope with the separation that they are having right now under the COVID quarantine with their loved ones. So in order to get started, we want to know a little bit more about our audience. So I'm going to put a poll, and if you would go ahead and just let us know who you are, that would be tremendous. And we'll just give everybody a moment to clock that in. Looks like we have a lot of people that are falling in the other category, which is great. We have home care and hospice. About 17% of the attendees are in that world. We've got about 11% that are working in a skilled nursing facility, about 11% working in assisted living, and about 8% of the attendees who are family or friends. And we have, looks like one person from higher education. So that is wonderful. So thank you all for participating. Adult daycare, we've got some chats coming through. So we've got somebody from adult daycare. Thank you for letting us know about that. And if you want to chat in anything to the group, what I would, I learned this as I've becoming more adept at these Zoom meetings, is that when you send a comment in the chat box, make sure that you see the little drop-down menu there, that you let us know if you want to send it to just the panelists or to all attendees. So make sure you change that setting. So very good. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Before I jump in, oh, I find I can also share results. Why don't I just do that too? Before I jump in, I want to let you all know that if you are an Illinois professional, licensed professional, and you are interested in getting a CEU for this webinar, I want you to know that ElderWorks is sponsoring the CEU for us today. And following the webinar, you will be getting an email from them, and they'll give you the information that you need to process your CEU. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the AGE-u-cate Training Institute YouTube channel. And we will also provide you a link to that webinar, to the YouTube following this webinar. I am going to be presenting the first half, about 15 minutes or so, 15-20 minutes. Drew will then do her portion of the webinar, and we want to make sure that we keep a little bit of time on the back end for any questions or comments that you might have. We will do our best to try and moderate the chat that we have going on here. So, so we'll keep up with that. And as I said, if feel free to use that chat space and make sure that you indicate who you want your chat to be broadcasted to. I want to jump back real quick, and I mentioned just a moment ago about ElderWorks. ElderWorks, I'm very pleased to have them sponsoring the CEU today, because they are in fact a training partner with the AGE-u-cate Training Institute. And what that means is that ElderWorks also has a certified trainer on their staff who are able to deliver programs that are offered by the AGE-u-cate Training Institute. So we are glad that they are a training partner with our institute and that they're sponsoring the CE today. So we will get started. I'll give you just a little bit more about my background. I worked for about 31 years in the senior housing and healthcare industry, with most of that time being spent in skilled nursing and in memory care. I started out my career in as a social worker, and then I moved into administration around 1990. But most of that time working in skilled nursing, I was very active working in memory care units and working with families and the residents in memory care. In December of 2017, I left nursing home operations and joined the AGE-u-cate Training Institute as a master trainer, and most recently as a grants coordinator for the states of Ohio and Minnesota. In addition to working for ATI, I'm also the interim director of the gerontology program at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb, and I teach courses in gerontology and leadership and aging services. When Drew presents, she will give you a little bit more about her background as well. So I want to tell you also a little bit more about the AGE-u-cate Training Institute. ATI is, the home office is in Bedford, Texas, and I'm one of 2 Chicago-based trainers, and actually that number is 3 Chicago-based trainers with the AGE-u-cate Training Institute, who also has a trainer on their staff. What ATI does is we develop and deliver high-impact training and education programs that ignite change and transform attitudes and actions in an aging society. Our flagship programs consist of Dementia Live, Compassionate Touch, and Flashback. The goals that Drew and I have for you today, and realizing that we are talking to a very diverse group of people on this webinar, the voice of this webinar is really directed to family caregivers. But we are so glad to have all of the care partners on this call that are working in skilled nursing and assisted living and adult daycare. We want this webinar to be a good resource for you that you can share with your family members. So as we move through, just understand we're directing our comments directly to caregivers, but we're glad that you're all here so that you can tap into this resource as well and share some of this content with your family members. So our goal today is that we want to bring peace of mind to you as the family caregiver in this really stressful and uncertain time. And we want to help you as a family caregiver partner with your care community to preserve the quality of life as much as we possibly can for your loved one who are living with dementia. We know that today, more than ever, having a healthy partnership between families and the professional caregivers that are taking care of your loved ones is so critically important. But we also know that it is an extremely stressful time for you as a family caregiver. It is for everybody because times are so uncertain right now. We don't know what to expect. And when we first started with this quarantine, back in the beginning or so of March, I think many of us were thinking, oh, this will be for a few weeks or maybe a month. And probably as we get into April or May, things are going to kind of go back to normal. But it is appearing that this could be going on for quite some time. And it also appears that nursing facilities and senior care communities are going to be some of the last organizations that are going to be able to open up to the public. So we see this as an issue that could be much longer term than what we were initially thinking. So my portion, we're going to begin with identifying and acknowledging the family member concerns for those who are living in skilled nursing and assisted living related to COVID quarantine. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about communication challenges for people that are living with dementia and how it impacts their ability to understand, and discuss why our communications influence the feelings and behaviors in people living with dementia. Then we're going to move into Drew's portion of the presentation, and she's going to offer some really great hands-on practical tools for you as family members to help you cope with this time. And then we will move into some question and answer. One of the challenges about doing a webinar around the issue of dementia is that dementia, people who have the symptom of dementia are all in a different place in time with it. They're experiencing it very differently. So sometimes to generalize or globalize things related to dementia is very difficult. So some of what we say today, you may find very helpful. You may say that doesn't really apply to my loved one. You may, you may not find everything that we say that is going to really hit home, but we hope that at least there's something in the webinar that you will find helpful. So I want to start with acknowledging probably the things that are going through your mind right now. As a family caregiver, it's my job to be there to make sure that my loved one is getting the care that they need. If I'm not there, mom could forget who I am, or she's going to deteriorate and get worse. The staff aren't going to remember to do X, Y, Z. And I need to know what's going on all the time. Or my parent or loved one is going to worry about me. And I'm afraid that the community where my loved one is living, they're not going to check on her on a regular basis. These could be some, maybe some, not all, of the things that are going through your mind right now. And they're all absolutely legitimate concerns. As family caregivers, that is how we perceive our job. Our job is to be there. Our job is to make sure. Our job is to ensure that. Our job is to be a companion for my loved one. We have all of these notions about what we are supposed to do as a family caregiver. And most of these things you cannot do right now. So it's creating a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety and worry. And what I want to do in this first part is to hopefully give you a little bit of peace of mind about this. Because it may sound very peculiar to say this right now, but having memory loss could be a blessing right now for your loved one. And we know that dementia carries with it many symptoms for the people who have it. And dementia is a symptom. And it's a symptom of an underlying disease process, most common being Alzheimer's disease. And we know that dementia affects many aspects of our cognitive functioning. But for today, I want to focus on just two of those areas, and that's memory loss and communication. A heartbreaking reality of living with dementia is this combination of memory loss and impaired communication ability. And together, these impairments create confusion, disorientation, and disassociation from reality. So memory loss, let's talk about that. There's generally 3 levels of memory loss that we talk about. The first is the inability for immediate recall, and that is to remember things that happened 30 seconds ago, or that an hour ago or 2 hours ago. It's those immediate things that occur. Then there's short-term memory loss, which is loss of memories of events that happened yesterday, last week, or last month. And then we have long-term memory impairment. And the long-term memories are often outside of our conscious mind, and it's information that is can be called into our working memory when we need it. And some of the information that's in our long-term memory bank is relatively easy to recall, and then there are other memories that are much more difficult to access. So people with dementia will begin the process by often losing that immediate and short-term recall, but it's the long-term memories that actually stay with people on a longer-term basis. So as the disease progresses, they lose touch with current day, and oftentimes, and I'm sure as family caregivers you know this, they are living in the past, and that's what they can recall. That's where we want to be with our loved ones. is in the past with them if that's where they are. So pulling them into current day realities is not a helpful place for somebody with dementia to be. The other challenge with memory, with this situation is the communication aspect. We know that people with dementia, oftentimes in the early stages of the disease, they're going to miss about a quarter of the words that are spoken to them. So that's pretty good. They're going to, for the most part, have a pretty good understanding in the early stages of dementia, but they might miss some key things. But as the disease progresses, they are missing about half of the words that are being spoken to them. And then at the end stage, they're missing most of the words that are spoken to them. So the assumption with this webinar is that most of the caregivers that are probably on this call, and most of the professional caregivers who are caring for your residents, you're probably caring for people who are in the later to end stages of the disease process. So we need to understand that when we speak to them, oftentimes they're not able to tune into what we're telling them to do. And as professionals working in the industry, we know that the best way to communicate with somebody with dementia is in very brief, short, succinct, concise ways. So if you out there have ever gone through AGE-u-cate's Dementia Live experience, it's an experience that we put the learners through that the best that we know how replicates what it's like to have dementia. And you will know that, or you realize an experience with that, what it's like to have a confused brain and what it's like to not be able to understand when somebody is actually speaking to you. So there may be one word or two words in a sentence that somebody in later stages or end stages of the disease is going to be able to extract and tune into. So the combination of this memory loss and communication challenge makes it very difficult for our loved ones with dementia to truly understand what's happening right now. And that it impairs their ability to communicate their thoughts and feelings to us because they are confused, because they're not really tuned into the present day. They have a difficult time expressing to us how they're feeling. Now, many of us, and probably most of us who don't have cognitive impairment, have been doing a lot of expressing about how we're feeling right now with being quarantined. We're talking to each other about it. We're sharing our experience, and we have the ability to emote our feelings to people. And our loved ones with dementia are unable to do that. But with words, I mean, they're unable to put it all together and communicate their feelings. But what they are able to do is to communicate how they feel and their emotional responses to us through their behaviors. And we know that all behavior is communication in people with dementia. So my message to you, my friends, at this point is that what we need to pay most attention to are the emotions and the feelings that our loved ones with dementia have in the present moment. And studies suggest that emotions last long after memories fade. And the reason for that is that emotions like fear and love are carried out by the limbic system, which is the center of our emotional processing resides in the amygdala of our brains. And that receives the input from other brain functions like memory and attention. And so the amygdala is generally the part of our brain that is affected later in the dementia process than our hippocampus is. So how we make our loved ones feel is really what is so critically important right now. And a famous quote from Maya Angelou states that I've learned that people will forget what you said and they're going to forget what you did, but they're not going to forget how you made them feel. And this is the message that we want to communicate today to our family members, is understanding that how you communicate to them is going to affect directly how they feel. So what we need to do is understand the connection between how we communicate, how that communication affects their feelings, how feelings affect behaviors, and how behaviors and all of this affects quality of life. So consider the feelings behind the words that we are expressing to our loved ones. Sometimes the emotions that are being expressed are more important than what is being said. And that is directly a quote from the Alzheimer's Association. At this point, it's so important to focus in on feelings versus the facts. It's really not that important for our loved ones to know about COVID. Let's think about this for a minute. COVID is not even a word in their long-term memory bank that they're going to have any idea what that means. Probably the word quarantine is not a word that is used or was used on a regular basis. Pandemic is not a word that's used or that they're familiar with. So if you have the ability to communicate with your loved one, either through some type of through the phone or through a Zoom like this or any other digital format, we want to be cautious about how we are coming off to our loved ones. If we communicate from a place of frustration and anger, or sadness, or catastrophizing, oh my gosh, I don't know when this is going to be over, Mom, I'm so sorry, I can't come in and see you, they won't let me come in and see you, I miss you so much, are you okay? Oh my God, I hope they're remembering, da, 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 da. If we use that type of communication with our loved ones, what that's going to create are feelings of insecurity, fear, panic, anxiety, and paranoia. And my friends, that leads to disruptive types of behaviors. We're not going to get into what those behaviors are, but we know our professional caregivers know what those behaviors look like. Wandering, agitation, sadness, being resistive to care, kicking people out of their room. On the flip side, if we communicate from a place of calmness, reassurance, soothing and loving words and tone of voice, we're going to create a sense of comfort and security and trust for our loved ones. And that is really what our job is as caregivers: quality of life and quality of living. So with that, I want to turn it over to Drew, who I understand is everything I've said is going to be much easier said than done, because the reality is that you currently don't feel calm. You don't feel reassured. You're not feeling very calm and at peace right now. That is totally understandable. But hopefully we can help you kind of put that aside for the benefit of your loved one, because the reality is that they are not remembering day to day that you haven't been there. They're not remembering that it's been a month since you've seen them. They're not remembering that you just called them a half an hour ago. Now, when I say that, I'm using a very blanket generalization, and I understand that's going to be very specific person to person. But the general point is we don't have a need to have to remind our residents, our loved ones, over and over again that I can't be there to see you. I don't know how long this is going to go on. I'm so sorry, Mom. We don't need to be reminding our loved ones about that. One thing, and the last thing that I want to share before I turn it over to Drew, is that part of my teaching of young people at NIU about aging is that we have a lot of discussions and dialogue about growing old and issues related to senior care. And many of my students actually work in senior care organizations. And I want to read to you something that I found very reassuring from one of my students who works in a senior care community, and the level of care and empathy that these professional caregivers who are caring for your loved one actually feel. So she shares that that their residents still have to eat outside of the dining room, but for activities, we allow residents to come together but maintain 6 feet apart. So she believes that residents should be allowed to visit with each other, maintain good social distancing, but we are allowing residents to do this, and we are finding creative ways to reach our residents and provide them with the one-on-one care and attention so that we keep them feeling good and trying our best to keep them safe and feeling like they are socially connected. And I know that's just one student's response to this, but I really do believe that for the most part, the professional caregivers that are caring for your loved ones truly feel this way too, and they want the best for your loved one. So having said all of these things, I'm going to turn it over to Drew now, who is going to give you some very practical tools for how to actually do this. So Drew, take it away.
Thank you so much, Julie. Such a great amount of information. Again, my name is Drew Lazara, geriatric clinical navigator with AMITA Behavioral Health. And what that basically means is that I really get to spend my days working directly with family members and partners in our long-term care facilities when our residents with dementia are experiencing some disruptive behaviors primarily. And I really get to spend my time working on connecting people with resources to help improve quality of life and manage some of these behaviors. So very, very proud to be doing that work and proud to be working with all of the families and partners that I get to work with day to day. So let's jump in a little bit to how we really start to find ways to stay connected while we're separated. I think that one of the things that is so difficult is, Julie mentioned this, we are so overwhelmed with our own feelings about what's going on. I don't know about everyone on this call, but I, for one, have a lot of concerns about how long this will last. When are we going to get to go back to some of our normal activities? When can I do the things that I need to do? So there's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of things that we just don't have any control over. And so what I really want to focus on in this portion of the conversation is, what can we do? How can we focus on what we're doing and how we're doing it so that we are managing our own fears and anxieties, but also still getting the information to our loved ones and getting the information from our loved ones or the care partners that we work with so that we are still feeling like partners in all of this. So the first thing that I really want to talk about is that your loved one isn't alone. I think one of the primary thoughts that people often have is, oh my gosh, mom's all by herself. And oh my gosh, if I'm not there, you know, who's going to be there with her? They're all alone. They've got to be so lonely. Your loved one is actually not alone if they are living in a nursing environment, if they're living in an assisted living or a memory care environment. They're not alone. They have a care team that is really dedicated to keeping those residents safe, healthy, and engaged, just like Julie just talked about. And I think that that's really important to remember. And also, you chose this care team in most cases. You chose this placement and you chose them for a reason. So just wanting to take an opportunity to remind you to trust that choice. So as we first focus on how we communicate with our loved one and with our care team in particular, I want to spend a little bit of time thinking about what things we might need to do differently since it's not possible to visit on a regular basis. Just because you're not able to visit on a regular basis doesn't mean you still don't want to know what's happening and that you don't want to know how things are going. So let's talk about a few things that might make that easier. The first thing is to really consider scheduling a regular call time to get updates at a time that works for you and the staff at the care facility. Why do I suggest this? Because I, for one, am a person who can have anxious thoughts or worries or concerns pop up in my mind, and then I want to stop what I'm doing and I want to pick up the phone and I want to address that particular thought right now. That is not really an effective way to get the information you're actually looking for from your care team and the staff at the facility. Why? Because they might be in the middle of 100 things at that moment that you had an anxious concern. So by scheduling time that everyone's kind of in agreement with, it gives your care team an opportunity to have the information that you need and answer questions in a more effective way. And what does that do for you? It gives you the information you're looking for in a clear and concise and organized way. And it gives you an opportunity to ask questions and for your care team to have the time to respond to them. So I highly suggest scheduled check-in calls. Another thing to really think about is that many of our long-term care partners, assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing, they're looking for new and innovative ways to communicate with their families as well. A lot of them are putting together newsletters or regular email updates that give snapshots of what's happening during a day in the facility. I think it's important to know that those email updates are in fact updates. It's good to think of them as updates. I'm getting a lot of email updates from the schools for my teenage kids. A lot of updates are coming through. I get something daily letting me know what the changes are, what to expect, what will happen. Whereas 3 months ago, I may have just sort of skimmed those emails and moved them on to the side. Now I'm really taking the opportunity to read them carefully and read them thoroughly and accept the information I'm being given as an update. So I think that that's really important. Third, your care team will call if there is a problem. Trust that they will. I think we forget when we're not able to be there regularly or in our regular routine that if there is a concern or a problem, you're going to get a phone call. You're going to get a call updating you, letting you know what's going on. So just remember that piece of it. And accept that in many ways, for our care teams and the staff taking care of our residents and for our residents themselves, in a lot of ways, it's business as usual for them. Julie alludes to this in her portion where she talks about how, gosh, they might not even really know that this COVID situation is happening. So in a lot of ways, things are just moving along as they typically do. So know that your staff is doing everything that they can to care for your loved one and that it's another day of doing what they do. So it's business as usual for them. I think it's important to note that it is really hard to let go and trust someone else to take care of someone you love. And so if you have a specific concern, address it with your care team. This is in no way, shape, or form meant to minimize concerns you might have. So if you have a concern, I think it's important to stop, think it through, and address it with the care team. But really do try to refrain from assumptions, as that really just increases your own anxiety. Think of the questions you need to ask and then really work to trust the answers. Okay, as we move forward with some thoughts about communication with your loved one or a way to get the information you need from them, we need to think about being purposeful. And what does that mean? Well, it means that the communication with our people, with our loved ones, needs to make sense for them as much as it makes sense for us. So it's really important to stop and evaluate the benefit of the phone calls or the video chats. And the reason I say this is because while I might feel much better after a phone call with mom or grandma or sister or dad, I really need to stop and think, did my person feel good about that conversation? Or did they become frustrated or confused about the technology or more fearful because of the conversation that we had. So it's really important to evaluate, are the phone calls and or video chats making sense? Are they working for us? If they are, and that is working for you, again, I'm going to reiterate something that Julie talked about. Really try not to talk about all of the negative and anxiety producing things that are going on. Try and maintain light and cheerful conversation if you can. For those residents who are still able to kind of be aware of what's happening day to day, you might get questions. I would say try to answer them directly, but try and answer them without a whole lot of emotion attached, just the facts. You know, this is what I know, this is what's happening right now, and this is what we hope will happen. But really try and encourage conversations about the little things. Just, you know, what's going on? What'd you have for lunch? What's that weather look like out there? Did you get to watch your favorite show last night? Really just encouraging and supporting conversation. And then third, this is really important. We want to stick to the routine, even when it comes to how we communicate with our loved one. This is tough because the routine might have been that you come and have lunch every day with your loved one, or that you visit it every morning. So in some ways, the routine's already a little bit broken. So it's important not to disrupt it further. Why is that? It's because routine for those with dementia is really a way to minimize increased confusion. And it is one of the ways that we can create a sense of safety. If we know what's happening next, we feel safe. So when you're making a phone call or setting up a video chat, for example, if your loved one needs assistance from a staff member, make sure that it works for the staff member. It might be coordinating so that you make that phone call right after that morning getting dressed time happens, where you've got someone there to assist. Maybe the better time to talk is right before dinner, because right after lunch, they're taking a nap. So really work with your care team to know what would make most sense within the routine. And then I want to address something that I'm seeing a lot of, which is all of the new and innovative ways people are coming up with to communicate with their loved ones. Probably many of you see it too. It's all over Facebook, and there's all sorts of, you know, good news stories about it, where people are doing window visits, or they're coming onto the lawn and they're holding up big signs, or they're putting balloons out and they're singing happy birthday from the front door of a facility. These are fabulous. They're fabulous if the person you're communicating with can understand what you're doing. So if you have a loved one that doesn't have dementia, but they're living in an independent living setting and they can't come and go because of the new guidelines, sure, absolutely. Any which way you can think of to communicate with them is fine. But I caution you if you have a loved one in a memory care situation, because doing a window visit might be incredibly disruptive to their routine, and it might be incredibly confusing for them. I see you on the other side of that window. I can't hear you. I see you waving your hands at me. Why can't you come in? And now I want to get out to you. So now I'm going to be pushing my way towards the door to try to get to you. We really need to evaluate each and every situation for our person's best interest, to know if it makes sense or it doesn't. Okay, so we're going to move into a little bit of a different feel here. What I really want to talk about now is ourselves. How do we best care for ourselves during this time? Because we know that if we're best taking care of ourselves, we're in a much better position to take care of those we love. So we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of self-awareness and what things we can really be aware of that will help us be better caregivers from afar. And we're going to talk about self-care, again, so that we can take care of ourselves to be better caregivers. We really need to take time to think about how we're behaving in the new normal. You know, in many ways, COVID-19 has forced us all to find new ways of doing things. We are all learning how to engage differently. And quite frankly, we don't always get to choose what it looks like. But by incorporating some of these self-awareness strategies and intentional self-care strategies, it really can help us manage these things that we can't control. So we're going to start with being aware of our thoughts and our feelings and our behaviors. Julie talked about this in her portion as well as it related to communication within the dementia resident. We're going to flip this a little bit and we're going to talk about how it relates to us as caregivers. By really spending time being aware of our thoughts and our feelings and our behaviors and how they interact, it really helps us manage the difficult feelings that we're having, and it gives us more opportunity to make choices about how we behave. It's classic cognitive behavioral therapy for those of you who are familiar with that. This is kind of the basis of it. So we're going to just use a couple of key components of this to try and help manage some of those negative feelings. So the first thing is really to be aware of negative thoughts. Again, I don't know about everyone on this Zoom call, but for me, the anxious thoughts can really they can pile up and they can start to cascade. And before I know it, I've got pages and pages of what ifs and negative thoughts, and I'm overwhelmed by them. So what do we do about that? The first thing is we have to recognize that it's happening. We have to be aware of our own negative thinking. And then once we're able to identify those negative thoughts, for example, let's go back to some of Julie's examples. Oh my gosh, I have to be there to make sure things are done right. If I'm not there, mom won't eat. The nurses will forget to fill in 1,000 blanks, right? It piles up. Once I can identify those negative thoughts, then I can really start the process of working towards stopping them. So thought stopping is a technique that we actually teach people to use, and it's designed to get in the way of those repetitive or irrational negative thoughts. And we encourage people to do things like picture a stop sign, hold up your hand, say out loud, stop, whatever you need to do to kind of stop the process of the negative thinking. And then we can do something called reality checking. It's really about asking yourself, what are the facts? So for example, if I'm not there, nothing will get done right. Mom won't eat. She's not going to get her medication. These are things you can actually check out in one of your scheduled calls with your care team. You can ask, what percentage of meals is mom eating? Is she eating her breakfast? Is she coming out for lunch? Did she get her medication this morning? Did she give you any trouble with it? You can actually get facts about what's happening there, and then you can work with it according to the actual information. And then once we know the facts, we can start to reframe our thoughts. And reframing is not about lying to ourselves. It's not about coming up with a completely different narrative. It really is about taking what we know and just changing it to be a little more manageable. So you might say, man, I really wish I could be there to help. I know it's easier when I'm there. But right now, the safest thing is to let the care team really do their job. So I'm going to make sure to check in every day so that I can keep tabs on how things are going and make suggestions if that could be helpful. So it's not changing your worry, it's just changing how you're thinking about it. The second thing to be aware of is your own triggers. I'm just going to touch on this very briefly because that is so personalized and individual. But these are just situations that lead to your negative thinking. For me right now, it can be watching the news. There's plenty of news out there that's incredibly triggering. And what I'm discovering is that if you watch 15 minutes of today's news, you've seen all 8 hours of it. It's just kind of on a loop. So go ahead and get the news if that's important to you. But maybe if it's starting to create anxiety within you, limit your exposure. Also recognizing are the people that you're using as your support system supportive? Or do they happen to be people that kind of feed your own negative thought patterns? It's just important to kind of know where you're getting any negative influence and where you're able to go and search out the positive support. Okay. Let's see, I gotta move my screen. Okay, so we now need to move into the self-care piece. Self-care is so incredibly important. And again, you hear me say this over and over again. A lot of what we're talking about is identifying areas where we can assume more control. Because when we can focus on the things we can control, we just feel a little bit safer and a little less anxious. So the first thing that we can control is building in breaks. Many of us are managing our routines from home right now. Many of us are working from home. Not all of us. Our assisted living and skilled nursing partners are certainly still going in. Probably a lot of our healthcare workers are. But what we need to do, whether we're going into work and facing a long and busy shift, or whether we're managing our days at home, we need to build in breaks. We need to build in breaks from negative information cycles. We need to build in breaks for lunch or meal times, build in a break for a walk. The before times, as we're calling it in my house, there were a lot of natural breaks built into our days. There were chit chats with colleagues in the middle of the day. We could take a minute to sit down and have lunch in many cases. We could look forward to the end of the shift where we knew that there was going to be time to sort of relax at home. The now times really they look different. Our breaks don't look the same. They just don't feel quite as relaxing. So we need to take some control over that and build those in. On every good self-care list, we talk about healthy eating and good sleep, and that's for a reason. Again, when things get really busy or when I get really overwhelmed, the first thing that tends to go for me is healthy eating. Why? Because it's easier to grab a bag of chips than steam a bag of broccoli for some reason. So we need to find ways to still try to incorporate nutritional eating, finding ways to make sure that we're still taking care of our bodies that way. And then also good sleep. Routines are jumbled up, our shifts look different, our schedules look different, but good sleep is still really, really important. And so one of the things that we recommend is maintaining a natural time to go to bed every night and kind of keeping it the same. And then also setting an alarm in the morning and getting up at the same time every morning. Again, maintaining routine gives you a feeling of control, and it's just taking good care of yourself. Incorporating exercise where you can. I like to take walks when the weather is nice. There are tons of apps out there right now that will allow you to have some at-home workouts, but just getting some movement into your day. And then my favorite is find something that relaxes you and do it as often as you can fit it in. It could be reading or playing an instrument, taking a bath, listening to music, whatever it is, find it and find a way to do it at least every day, really giving you that opportunity to relax. Okay, and then tips for managing anxiety. I'm assuming that there's anxiety out there. Maybe not, but I'm assuming that there's quite a bit. So let's talk about a couple of things that we can do. The first is to practice deep breathing as often as you can. This is something you can do anytime, anywhere. I could do it right now if I needed to. I can take a deep breath, I can count in, and I can count out. And I've then practiced an anxiety management tool. What's interesting is that it's really hard to focus on anxious thoughts when you're counting out your breathing. It's hard to do both of those things at the same time. So deep breathing not only relaxes the body, it also interrupts the anxious thinking pattern. Grounding techniques. Grounding is a word we use again in cognitive behavioral therapy, and it basically means putting yourself back in this moment. It's really about trying to figure out what I can do in the present and not worrying about what happened in the past, not worrying about what's going to happen in the future, but really trying to remain here in this moment. Why is this so important right now? Frankly, because we have no idea what's going to happen in the future. We don't know what's going to happen a week from now or 6 weeks from now. We're all sort of waiting for more information. So the best thing we can do is center ourselves in this moment and address what we can do in this moment. Third thing that I really like to do is practice gratitude journaling. And I hear you, not all of you are writers. That's okay. You don't have to write. You don't have to journal. But I really do find that setting aside intentionally some time to think about what you're grateful for really can alter the larger perspective. So there's a lot of things to be worried about. There's a lot of things to be concerned about. Absolutely there are. And we do spend a lot of time thinking about those things. But for most of us, there's also plenty to be grateful for. So really try to step aside and think about those things that you're grateful to have in your life. It's a nice way to start your day. It's a nice way to end your day. It's a nice middle ground whenever you like to do it. And it really can just alter your perception of things. Meditation. Meditation is also something that you need to set aside time for, but there's all different ways to do it. There's short meditations, there's guided meditations, there's all sorts of ways to practice this skill. And right now there's lots of apps that will allow you to do that. I believe the Daily Burn is one. I only know about that because my kid's PE teacher is having them log into that free app every day and practice a guided meditation. So give it a try and see if that's something that might work for you. And then lastly, maintaining a routine. We've talked about this and talked about this. The more routine that you can build in, the more secure you will feel. And we know that managing anxiety is about understanding what we can control and what we can't control. Focusing energy on the things that we can control and working to let go of the things we can't is really our best tool in managing anxiety. As Julie said, this is all so much easier said than done, and we are all doing the absolute best we can. So remember to be patient with yourself and with others. It is uncharted territory for everyone, and we are figuring it out together. So thank you guys so much. I think we've got just a few minutes left for some question and answer. So I'm going to toss it back over to Julie, who's been moderating the chat, to take that on.
All right. Thanks, Drew. One thing I just want to add in, and Drew and I talked about this before the webinar today, is we understand that things aren't perfect in long-term care communities, assisted living. We know that, and unfortunately, what you hear a lot about is the negative stuff on the news about things that don't go as well. One of the comments in the chat room was that sometimes we have to understand that there's just things that we can't control. And I think that's an important point to make out here. But also, there are so many good stories out there too about communities who are really trying very, very hard to take good care of the residents, keep them safe. And we hope that you hear about those good stories as well, and not just about the negative. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I will just take a look here. Says, Drew, what was that meditation app that your children use?
The Daily Burn is what they're using. I haven't used it myself. There's another one. I don't know that it's free, but it's called Headspace. My mom loves Headspace. So those are two apps for meditation.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Good. Our contact information is here on this page, so we'll leave it up for just a couple moments. So if you need to reach out to either one of us, please feel free to do that. My contact is a couple different ways. You can reach me as well as Drew. We would welcome certainly conversation, anything that you would like to connect with us on. We are available to you for that. All right, I am not seeing any questions, burning questions. Here we go. How do you respond to a loved one in memory care who calls very anxiously saying that she is locked inside someplace that she is thinking about from the past? Drew, would you like to take that one?
Those are tough. Those are tough. So these are situations where the dementia is really kind of creating like a delusional thought pattern. So obviously, when you're talking directly to that person, you want to not argue with them necessarily about what they're saying, because what they're saying in their mind is absolutely true. So telling them, no, that's not where you are, is not necessarily going to be effective. So you might want to just try gently, oh my goodness, you know, that sounds kind of scary, and then trying to redirect the conversation into something else. Sometimes these delusions are really fixed and really, really difficult to kind of even talk them off of and get into another conversation. So that's where I would absolutely reach out to your care team and talk to them, see if they've got an on-site psychiatric provider that might be able to visit with that person. They're doing a lot of telehealth visits right now, so COVID shouldn't necessarily stop you from being able to get some evaluation there. There are some medications that can sometimes help with that. And then also talking to your care team about what they're doing to see if they've got anything that might work. They might have tips and tricks for you of things that will redirect the conversation. And certainly letting them know, you know, that that's happening is important so that they can be aware of it. Sometimes the answer is to try to limit those phone calls. And that sounds kind of harsh, but sometimes just not picking up the phone, sometimes these calls come in incessantly, 10, 12, 15 a day. Sometimes just limiting how often you even pick up the call will help the problem, because you're not giving it room to grow. So that's another thing to consider depending on how intense it becomes.
Good suggestion. Good. All right, everybody. Well, we will conclude this webinar today. As I said, it will be live streamed at some place on YouTube, and we will get that link to all of you so that you can share it as you need to. But on behalf of Drew and myself, we want to thank you for being a part of the webinar today. We certainly hope you found some of this information helpful, and we wish you all the very, very best as we together try to navigate through these really stressful, confusing times for everybody. So everybody take care, and thanks again. Okay, I think we're